It's not enough to just be like a famous face with a product. You have to have skin in the game. You have to have a real connection to the product. You have to have a point of view. And it can't just be like, well, my agent thought it was a good
Mm.
idea.
Welcome to There Is No Alternative. I'm Tina Bou-Saba, and today we are joined by Asha Coco, founder and CEO at Glow Up Partners, where she works with top creator talent like the Lipstick Lesbians. I first met Asha years ago when she was an executive at Givaudan, a global leader in fragrance. I have always admired her energy, deep beauty knowledge, and incredible eye for what is next in the industry. Asha is highly entrepreneurial, and I am so excited to learn more about how she made the leap from big beauty to founder-led brands and how she thinks about building new beauty brands today. Hi, Asha.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. This is going to be a great conversation. Okay, so let's start with a warm-up question. Do you have a hype song that you listen to or anything that you do to get pumped up for big meetings and stuff like that?
Okay, so I don't have a hype song. I have a hype genre. I really love EDM music. However, one of the things I'm very, very religious about is like my soul cycle community. I have a crew where we go every Friday, like church, and we ride at 4 p.m. at the studio in Nomad in Manhattan. There's always a playlist. It's a mix of hip hop and EDM, and it's really a rotation of all the hype songs. But that's really, it's amazing because it's about community and it's also really about like, you know, boosting your energy. I have like many besties who attend the class from all different like walks of life in different industries, fashion, events, someone who works at the UN. Like it's really eclectic and we just all come together and have the best time. So that is like what I do every week to just really power myself through.
I love that. Next time I'm in New York, I want to come to a class with you. I
Oh,
love Soul Cycle.
it's the best. You have to come.
So great. So great. I feel it really burns off a lot of that like stress and energy.
Totally. I even find that if, again, the religious classes on Fridays that I go every week, but if I'm having a day where I'm like, I need a pick me up, like an energy
Yes.
pick me up, or it was like, it's been a challenging week or a challenging day, I'll even try to carve out time either really early or late at night and make sure I go because I always know like the music and the energy is going to reset my energy.
Yep. Yep. So cool. Okay. Well, I would love to talk about your career as a starting point. Can you tell us how you started to work in beauty?
Sure. It goes back to my undergrad and internships. I spent every summer of my undergrad at Estee Lauder companies, and I rotated into different brands and different roles. I remember at the time it was public relations, global marketing roles on, you know, different iconic brands. And that was where I really got to meet a lot of the people that were in that era shaping the beauty industry. And I loved it. And I had a background in the arts, in theater
Mm,
and in dance, and I felt like it was a really creative part, like a creative industry that I could see myself in. I was already a consumer, I was a beauty lover, and I was like, if I have to pivot out from, being an artist, this is a place where I can call home and really build something. And so that was how I started. And then immediately when I graduated from school, I was like, I've been in beauty my entire career. I've never not worked in a beauty or CPG brand. So from that moment, I spent like probably the early years really focused in strategics, kind of in traditional roles, global marketing roles at Coty and
mhm.
Lauder. And it was very foundational. And it's where I learned how do you build things from the ground up, very traditional product management, brand management roles. And at the time, I was starting to learn about all the pieces of how do you make products come to life. And I was introduced to different suppliers and understanding the workings behind the scenes. And I was really inspired by the work that the suppliers were doing. I felt like they were really driving innovation forward. And I thought they were like really inventing the future of beauty. I was like, it's not happening in this room, it's happening at the suppliers. And I was like, I have to get to a supplier. So that was like kind of my first jump. Remember, I was at like in my early career at a pivotal point where you have that opportunity for a promotion. And I decided to just go take a lateral move so I could go to the supplier and like dig in there. And that was when I moved to my first fragrance house. And then I subsequently spent a decade at flavor and fragrance houses where I worked on probably every brand in the industry, from the biggest strategics like L'Oreal and Lauder and Revlon and Avon, and it goes on, to indie brands. And when I started working with indie brands, that's when I started to kind of really come into my own from an entrepreneurial sense, because I was in a business development role, really trying to forge a path for a pre-revenue business
Uh-huh.
who may be completely unknown, and champion for resources for them. And it would really require me to sit internally and pitch for those resources to champion this project, because often those early years is not when, you really see a high return on investment as a supplier, but it's for the promise of the future and growing the business together that you can see a great return. And so I became very astute at figuring out who had potential. And I mean, you can't, they're not all hits all the time, but I had a pretty great track record at the time of really identifying
You have a
some
great eye.
diamonds in the rough that have had really incredible growth trajectories and exits. And when I would meet these founders, sometimes they were creators or they were like, passionate, business people who had a great concept. They'd show up with a deck and they're like, how do I get this done? And I really empowered myself to figure out how should they get it done beyond the formula. I know I can deliver the formula, but they still need all these other elements. And I started to like really build organically my network so that I could help service my clients, almost because what I was able to do back then was I would be able to negotiate for my company a really long-term partnership in terms of a contract that would create like longevity and a trajectory for growth. But I needed, to provide a lot of value. And so that was a way I could provide value, by offering
Mhm.
other resources in my network that could help them grow the business. And it was an incredible model. That's when after doing that for maybe like 5 years in two different organizations, working exclusively with indie brands and building them from the ground up, that's when I decided to take the leap. And I was like, well, maybe I can go back to the brand side and maybe I should start helping brands scale in a new way.
Okay. So much to dig into.
I know.
Before we really get going, though, something you said in the beginning that caught my eye goes back to the very beginning. Is it true that you were a Rockette?
Yes, this is absolutely true. So when I applied to undergrad, I was pursuing BFA in dance programs because I had studied classical ballet my entire life.
Okay.
My whole life before beauty was ballet. And my college roommate at the time was a dancer, and she was dancing with the Rockette. She was a multidisciplinary dancer, but she was a dancer with the Rockettes. And she's like, girl, you got to audition. They're diversifying the line. They're looking for women of color. And I have Indian heritage. She's African American, and she was like the leader of like bringing in all these different diverse backgrounds to audition. And we went through a workshop and we auditioned, and yeah, and then I danced with the Rockettes for 2 years. So when I was interning back in the day at Lauder, I mean, it was hilarious because they're like, she's our Rockette in the winter and she's our intern in the
So
summer.
cool.
And it was really interesting. And that, like, if I think back, where did my love of beauty start? It started
Mhm.
because of performance and because
Yeah.
I've been using makeup since I was 7 years old. I had like this extent, like I was always using makeup for shows, and I always like, was playing with different formulas. I had an extensive fragrance collection. I remember all the fragrances I wore through like middle school and high school. I've been a beauty consumer the entire time. And like, especially like if you see now, even the Rockettes today, they did a collaboration with Sephora this year. They always talk about their
Mhm.
iconic red lipstick. I mean, like we lived it. I had lashes every day and a full beat and the red lip. And so it was very easy for me to get into the beauty industry because I was just like such an avid user. I'd need long wear that lasted five
Yeah.
shows a day. And so I really was super engaged and excited about the category. So it was just like, it just made sense.
Totally. You were living and breathing it.
Yeah.
How long was the prep time before a Rockette's performance?
So the schedule is very grueling. Um, and intensive. I remember we would rehearse for about, I think it was like 4 to 6 weeks before the show would open. So let's say
Yeah.
starting end of September or October is when it would
Mhm.
get intense. You'd have intensive rehearsals all day long. And then the show would open and you would have anywhere between 3 and 5 shows a day. And so, like in New York City, they have two casts. So they would rotate on the days where there were like a lot of shows, you do half of them because it's like a factory. It's like every 90 minutes on a break, then another 90 minutes, and you just
Yeah.
bang out 3 shows and then you're on your way. And so I was in the cast that performed mostly in the mornings in the daytime. And then in the evenings, I would go to school. And so I would always like stack my
Wow.
classes in the evenings during the fall and winter season. And then come spring, I would add extra classes because I
Mhm.
wasn't dancing full time, which was
Wow.
crazy, but that's like how it all started.
Yeah. Such a cool experience. Okay. So, one of the other things that I read about is when you were working on I think on the supplier side, you were early in touch with a fragrance founder who has since built an extraordinary business.
Yes, that's my dear friend Mona Katan at Kayali. It's an incredible story because back then, I mean, the brand's been out for 7 years. They just
Mhm.
celebrated their seventh birthday. So I think, we were in touch 8 years ago, and I would scour lists of who was going viral on social media and who had the largest audience. Like we were in within the fragrance house, we were focused on business development. There were a lot of celebrity fragrance deals, and they followed a very traditional like licensing model, royalty fee. And that had been very successful for many years, but like everything was shifting. It was the era of the rise of Glossier and
Mhm.
creators were coming to the forefront. And so I would like study who was hot and up and coming and going viral. And it was always like the crew at Huda Beauty. And I was like,
Yeah.
I felt it in my bones. I was like, I know that they need a fragrance. And they knew too, but we hadn't met. So I just cold emailed them. I cold emailed
Wow.
them, used as many means possible. I probably sent emails through multiple platforms, but it was LinkedIn that helped me make the connection. And they're based in Dubai. So it was also like an unlikely structure sitting in New York. But my mantra was always like, shoot my shot. My husband says this all the time. He's like, you miss 100% of the shots you don't make. So
Yes.
I was like,
Yeah.
shooting my shot. I was like, this could go nowhere. No one could reply, but let's see. And I remember at the time, because I was new in business development, I was always tracking and I had like a 40% response rate to all my cold outreach. It was outstanding. I was like, I can
Wow.
do this. I can get to them.
Yeah, that's
Um,
high.
it was at the time. I mean, listen, it was not a sophisticated like CRM system, but it was a spreadsheet and,
Mhm.
it worked. But with the team, I was able to get in touch with Mona and she's like, you know what? We're in New York. It'd be great to meet. And I met her and Huda and we had a meeting. And in that meeting, I would do the pitch for the supplier. And I'd say, hey, here's how we could work together. These are the types of things we make. This is how we can help entrepreneurs. This is how I can help you. They're like, you know what? We've never had a conversation like this. They're like, we've met a bunch of fragrance houses and perfumers, but it's like we've never figured out how we can really like bring this concept to life. And I think that at the time, like that whole segment of perfumery has changed so much because now there's a lot of innovation coming out of Dubai that has global legs. But at the time, it
Mhm.
was very regionally specific. So I always had this like point of view that like I knew their brand and their reach was global and that they needed a global sensibility. And I knew that we had the talent in New York City to power a global concept. Whereas in the Middle East at that time, you had people doing very like specific style of perfumery that was very regionally specific and wouldn't really be successful around the world. So I was like, they need the resources here and I need to get them here. I know it's going to be a
Mhm.
huge success. Now, of course, like everything evolves and changes, but to get them started, I mean, they worked with some of the best perfumers in the world and they were like, we need glass, we need a killer bottle, we need
Mhm.
talent. They're like, do you know anyone we can hire? I mean, to the point where there was a woman who worked for me as my intern and I knew she was like finishing her business school and moving back to Europe and I was like, I think there's a job that's going to change your life if you're willing to move to Dubai, and she worked for them. It was incredible. So I really helped from the very beginning them start up and launch that first collection, and since then it's really blossomed into an incredible business, and I've stayed very close with the founder, and it's really sweet because I think the relationship was so much deeper than just being like the supplier of a good because we were all together, like building this in the beginning.
Oh, definitely, like, really a partnership, and, I mean, what a successful business that has been. I am so curious about something that you mentioned. When you talk about, with respect to fragrance, about, like,
Mm,
regional preferences,
mhm,
what do you mean by that? Like, what was going on in Dubai compared to, for example, the US fragrance market at the time? And is that still the case?
mm.
How has that changed?
I'd say, like, from my observation, and like, granted, like now I'm an observer, like
Sure,
not sitting
sure.
in a supplier anymore, so I don't have like my pulse on all
Mhm.
the current data, but
Yeah.
there's definitely like an Arabic style of perfumery that's very much a certain kind of construction in terms of its projection, its olfactive profile, and like the proliferation of ouds and the
Mhm.
woodiness, the strength factor, the behavior of layering that had not become a global phenomenon. Only Joe Malone at the time had been playing with layering. No one was layering in the way that now, like, I mean, really, Kayali was the one who
Yeah.
unleashed that. But like, like everyone in the U.S. is layering if you go on TikTok.
Yes.
So the style of perfumery was specific olfactive categories that maybe weren't like commercial for the US because the US was very like there were two poles, I'd say, in terms of what the market still probably relevant, like this very bright, fresh, floral fruitiness.
Yeah,
It's like
okay.
happy and uplifting,
I
or
see.
these
Yeah.
like more richer floral gourmand vibes. Um, so that kind of style wasn't always, sometimes there were things that aligned and had great success in the
Yeah.
Middle East, but a lot of things that were developed in the Middle East didn't always like work in the West. And now it's like blurred. Now there's also this proliferation and like growing of like the gourmand category, which has been like super interesting. If you look at brands that have done crazy TikTok viral and like crushing it on Amazon, like Latafa, my gosh, like, and they're like, they have this like huge, and I really think that Kayali, in a sense, like they probably paved the way from an
Yes.
olfactive standpoint in some of these areas. They really know how to really push those kinds of styles and make them modern. And I think also like the fragrance consumer has evolved and she has a wardrobe, he has a wardrobe, and they're learning how to layer and make their own signature. So like it's different than what it was
Mhm.
from my perspective.
So, do you have an all-time favorite fragrance?
No, it's like asking if you have a favorite
No.
child,
No.
and you can't do that. That's my favorite game. So I do have a game I do at dinner parties. Like if we've eaten dinner and everyone's had a little wine and someone starts talking about fragrance, like my husband laughs. I'll be like, "You like this? Let's talk about what you like. You like this, so you might like this." And then I start pulling all my fragrances out from my room and then we have a smell session and people love it. I like different styles for different moments. I definitely have a wardrobe, and it
Yeah.
depends on whether I want to, feel fresh or if I want to feel cozy and cocooning or do I want to feel bold. It's like fragrance for me is like lipstick too. I have different lip wardrobe for
Mhm.
different, um, like different moods, different, parts of me that I want to exude.
Yeah.
I usually love to play with a bold lip when I'm really like, want to feel empowered. Like I'm wearing a bold lip today, Tina.
I love it.
But,
No, I
to
love it,
play.
and it looks great on you.
Fun.
It is amazing, though, the wardrobing, I feel like today, it's so different even from a decade ago, I think, when it was, like, the
Mhm.
signature fragrance, now it is, like, totally wardrobing.
Yeah, the whole thing is how do you create something like you're creating intrigue in your own signature
Yeah.
like scent. And this is what has always been what has happened in the Middle East. And now it's like it's hit the US. And this is how like I'd say fragrance stock is behaving. Like there are creators that they are layering like oils and lotions and multiple fragrances and you're trying to figure out like what is their aura and that aura represents themselves.
Okay, gosh, we could talk about this for a long time, but we have so much
Yes.
to discuss. Okay, so let's go back to the career progression. You were one day you said you were Givaudan at the time. You said, you know what, I'm gonna make the leap. I'm gonna go work in an entrepreneurial pursuit. Like, tell us about that. What was it, and what inspired you to go for it?
Yeah. Well, like all things come back to like your network and your
Yeah.
relationships, right? I had been thinking about moving back to the brand side, and I am not going to lie to you. I had a like there were moments where I was like, can I go back to the brand side? Like, have I been out
Mhm.
of it too long? And do I know what I'm doing? And how do I prove myself? Because I knew everyone. I mean,
Yeah.
all of the brands were my clients, and the people who worked with me knew what I was capable of. But I also knew that like like I was like, I don't fit in a box of a job description. And I knew that I also had to position my experience so that I can prove like how I don't have e-commerce experience. How am I gonna like run an
Mm,
e-commerce brand and all these things? I really had to like restructure the way I presented myself and with brands. But it all comes back down to network. And so actually it was my friend at Kayali was like, hey, I have a friend who has a brand. You guys should connect. Maybe you can be helpful. And
mhm.
that's how I was introduced to the team at Forever Mood and Jackie Ina. And that was an incredible experience, but
Yeah.
it was all so unlikely in that they're based in LA. This was, of course, this is a post-COVID world. I would have never pre-COVID looked at any roles in LA. And in fact, they were looking for like an operator locally as well. And because we just were really open to how we could all work together, we took the leap.
Mhm.
I mean, I had expertise that they needed on the team. They had this hot brand that had all these amazing opportunities at Sephora. And they were like, hey, come build with us. And so
Mhm.
that was kind of my first indie brand role after being at a supplier for a decade. And that was boot camp for, e-commerce and retail. What was great is like all of the work I had done, even as a supplier, because, I had both business development roles and marketing roles as a supplier.
Mhm.
Like I had my pulse on all the trends. I understood
Yeah.
what drove brands and what worked. I just wasn't the tactical person executing them, but I knew the opportunities and we just like were able to crush it. So we built the Fine Fragrance program and I helped get it set to launch,
Mhm.
which was pretty incredible, which totally sold out and was a huge success.
Yeah, yeah. But you knew, I feel like you saw early on what was happening in the creator influencer space from the vantage point that, yes, you had on the supplier side, but I think also your intuition around like where the consumer was going.
Yeah, I think that like and what's interesting is if I even reflect back to that time period and now, I think it's even shifting. It
Mm,
continues to shift in terms of the creator economy and what works and how these brands scale. At the time, I was like looking at the data and I was like, who are people like connecting to?
yeah.
And yes, like there's an affinity to like traditional celebrity, but like we could see that these creators could just drive so much more awareness and conversion and sales ultimately. So I remember it was even it was back when I was a supplier, like I mean, I dabbled in all of the segments of business development, but I pretty much doubled down on creator. I just was like, I know
Mhm.
creators are the space that's going to grow. I was like, I deprioritize celebrity. I mean, I get celebrities all the time on my desk to
Yeah.
be like, this agency sending this celebrity, like humongous people. And I'm like, it's not going to be as impactful as if we go with this creator who may just have like millions of followers versus this celebrity who's in a blockbuster film or whatever. But I do believe that like we have a platform we'll sell and it could be more sustainable. So it's been interesting. But the other reflection I would say is I've seen the good side of that, but also the part where it doesn't work because not all creators should have brands. It's just the reality.
Mhm.
I feel like we've explored this before, and I think where it's shifting today is that, there are creators who have massive audiences that believe they should be like selling a product or they have some passion or something they want to create. But if their community is not primed to receive that category, and if they're not actively talking about that niche and their consumers not used to shopping along with them and shopping from them, it's not going to work and they won't convert. And I have these conversations all the time. I meet creators all the time through my network and I'm always asked these questions, and I can very quickly spot like, this is an amazing idea. This is gonna go nowhere. And I don't even think anyone can execute it. And I don't know that you're gonna convert your audience based on what I see today. And I can usually just like scan a grid and know like the content will align or not align to the category.
Mhm.
And it's really hard because I think sometimes, people feel like they have this incredible audience and they think they're like, I can sell a ton of X, but it's like, but does that mean you should have a beauty line? I don't know. And
Right.
so I think even myself, I've become more discerning in like where I focus
Mhm.
my energy because you can really kind of look at indicators which I wasn't looking at back when I was, first starting out on the supplier side. There's
Yeah.
also more metrics to look at. And there's more platform like it's, there was no TikTok back then.
Okay. Well, that brings us to what you're working on today with the Lipstick Lesbians. But before we get there, I want to ask you about one other thing, which is one of the things that I observe that I think you are extremely good at, and I think is something that is very, very crucial for the type of work that you're doing is being able to be like the business person working with creative founders, which I think is a really unique and in demand skill set, but is hard. Can you talk more about that?
Sure. It's so interesting because I don't know that it's harder than other professional environments I've been in,
Interesting.
actually. But I also would say I've probably always worked with creatives, right?
Yeah.
I have like a background in the dance and theater world, and then the decade at the suppliers. I mean, I was working with perfumers who are like the most creative people in the world. So I think that there's always been a thread, even when I was at the strategics, like the brand leaders and creative directors. I mean, there's always been a thread of creativity and how to navigate around that
Uh-huh.
and put in structure around something that is hard to structure because you want
Uh-huh.
freedom to be creative. I feel very comfortable there. So I'm like, I don't know that it's necessarily that I'm like, I'm trying to think of like good tips of like, how did I hone that skill? Like, that's what I want to give you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that if I reflect on it, it's like, honestly, I think it's like clearly experience that's beyond just working for 25 years in
Right.
beauty. This is like my whole lifetime, but also making sure to have a balance of frameworks. And now I'm going to do a metaphor because I'm going to bring it back to the discipline of dance because dance, like classical ballet, is that because there's artistry, but there's structure. It's actually it's so structured dance because you're talking
Mhm.
about choreography and specific movements, and there's frameworks and there's music, and you do it a certain way. Like the Rockettes, it was precision.
Yeah.
Everyone's got to be in a line, everyone's going to line up, and you need to strive for perfection. So I'm used to creating frameworks around creativity. And so I really just focus on like what's the goals, like what are our objectives and goals. That's probably like foundational from my latter years. I remember when they would hand out annually I mean, they didn't, maybe they don't do it now, but back then they would physically print out the corporate strategy and like hand it out to employees.
Mhm.
And I used to have it at my desk. And so that I always was reminded that like everything I did laddered up to these pillars of this strategy that was our big corporate goal. Maybe that was, I imagine all of us, but me specifically. So when I think about projects or I think about brands, this is like how I'm like, what is my overarching goal? How do I think I'm going to get there? And then like keeping space for people to be creative. And I like to be creative too because I like have a creative background, but
Yeah.
it's maybe more structured. Like I think that some of my creators find me to be quite operational because I have structure.
Mm.
But for me, I'm like, I'm creative within my structure. So it seems to work and that seems to balance in a sense.
I love the ballet metaphor. At what age did you start ballet?
Like 4 years old.
Right. So I really think that you've been working on this since you're 4 years old.
Yeah,
Because I love
seriously.
this metaphor of like creativity within a structure. I mean, it is spot on. You're
Yeah.
born for this.
I was born for this, and it's literally the only way I know how to move through the world.
Yeah.
So
But
that is, I think, how I've found the balance. And I noticed this with when you find former dancers who are executives,
Mm.
it's like you find your kindred spirits and you realize like we all kind of operate and it's like a ballet thing. I think other disciplines, but very specifically ballet, because it really is quite regimented in certain areas of it.
Mhm. Really interesting. I mean, I think that it is like a language, right? There's a fluency that you have and this like being able to work seamlessly on the business and the creative side. And like I can certainly tell you from my vantage point, it is a unique skill. And so while it feels really natural to you, for many people it's like a different language. You know what I
Mm,
mean? So I think it's really interesting how you found such a professional alignment with that. It's awesome.
yeah.
Okay, so tell us about what you're working on today.
Yeah. So, I mean, amongst many interesting indie brand projects, one of the things I'm really excited about is the work that I've been doing with the Lipstick Lesbians. So, similarly to my story of moving into indie brands, I was again introduced by a friend to them about a year ago. And it's really one of the most unique propositions that
Mhm.
has like come across my desk, because generally people approach me just for, brand, but they're creators and they have many different arms to their business, and they really wanted help building out, we call it the universe, like their ecosystem of businesses. And
Yeah.
so I have been, of course, working with like agents and managers for many years. And that is not like, and they have extremely talented agents and managers who help them, build their business. But it was to think beyond that. And so I was like, I think I can bring this knowledge from like my years in beauty, my network, and how I can build infrastructure around a creator business so that you can continue to grow beyond content creation, which was their ambition and what they were building. They just needed more resources and strategy. And so one of the major initiatives was the launch of their digital curriculum called L Lab. And it really hit close to home for me because, I mean, I've told you my whole story. So
Mhm.
you start in the beauty industry and you're generally find your way in, but there's not like a degree necessarily, or of course, IT, of course, has a specialized degree, and there are a
Mhm.
few programs, but it's not everywhere where people are going to like major in beauty marketing and the ins and outs of the industry and how you do what you do. You really learn on the job. And what they did was they built a curriculum to help people learn how to develop products, learn how to
Mm.
evaluate products, and help content creators level up their content game. Because you know, and I know that there are some incredible, talented, high quality content creators, and then there's a lot of junk out
Yeah.
there. And unfortunately, I feel like on TikTok, because of like the rise of TikTok Shop, we're seeing more and more of the junk or these prescribed scripts, and like you're missing kind of the creativity and the true evaluation. And so they launched this incredible digital course, which is really democratizing beauty education, because one of their core pillars is to really scale beauty literacy. And I'm just so excited that we've been able to, touch people and change their lives. We have community events, and the
Mm.
things that these members say about how the education is like changing their life and changing how they think. They're all like aspiring content creators or growing content creators, or they're future brand founders. I mean, they're talking about like what they're building, and they're like, I learned this and this and this, and I had no resource to figure out how to do this. And so we've been building that. We've been building also kind of, they are expert educators and product developers. And
Mhm.
so they are very well networked within the space. And so they get tapped all the time for consulting projects and otherwise. So we've been building out an infrastructure so we can really service the industry in a bigger way, because everyone wants to know what they think. Everyone wants their evaluation before something hits, or they want to mitigate some sort of risk in advance of the thing launching. And it's great that they are, able to be a resource to the industry. And so this and maybe another project on the horizon,
Mhm.
but really kind of everything that they're doing is again to scale beauty literacy and to give the consumer, better high quality content so they can make the choices that are best for them on what they should consume in beauty. And it's so much fun.
How did they get so famous? Because I feel like, I don't know, it's always hard to separate what the algorithm is serving to me, versus
Mhm.
someone else. But I feel like the Lipstick Lesbians came on the scene and really exploded. And there's something very special about what they're doing. I'd love to, like, with through your eyes as really an expert in this, like, what are they doing that is so powerful, and how have they grown so quickly?
Yeah. I mean, they were on my radar before I met them in person because of the way that they talk about formulation and break down products that
Mhm.
is accessible and easy to understand. Like, to your point about language, sometimes you'll be like in a boardroom, in a meeting, talking about a product. And if you don't know the language, like you have no idea what people are talking
Yeah.
about. And I think they so beautifully can break down the process in a way that everyone can understand. Alexis, a lot of her content, you'll see she'll like do metaphors. There was a piece the other day, and it was like she was talking about pasta and like doing the metaphor about pasta
Ooh.
to like the formulations and like really understanding language that consumers can grasp. And I think it's incredible. And it comes from a place of, I mean, it truly is their authentic selves. And it started, I think, by accident, like Alexis and Christina were in Sephora and they were at the Makeup by Mario gondola. And Christina whipped out her phone, and Alexis just was being herself because this is what she did, because she's a product developer. And Christina is an educator and she always is like focused on gamifying education, like, because that was her background. And so she would ask really poignant, important questions to like really break down what is happening. And so she recorded the whole thing and they put it up and it went crazy viral. And then they just continued to do it on repeat. And that's how they scaled. Everything has been, their voice in terms of how they can really educate the consumer about beauty and formulation. And that's the other thing I would say that's happening right now. It's really challenging. Like, I remember being a supplier and having to educate my clients on different regulation and the impact of different regulation and how formulations, like in different claims, what can you say you are? Are you clean? Are you this? Are you that? Are you vegan? What does it mean? And it was very difficult. Like, we would make PowerPoint presentations. I would sit for like 2 hours with clients and educate them on a topic of something that was happening from a regulatory standpoint with some partners of colleagues of mine in a room. And I think that they've been able to scale this type of conversation, not just regulatory, but in terms of
Mhm.
like the formulation and how to do it. And it's because, this is what they know. Like, Alexis knows how to do this. This is what she's done her entire career. And so it is really special because I've worked with a lot of very brilliant product developers and creatives, perfumers. And I think that
Mhm.
they have such like an approachable way, and it's fun and it's
Oh,
with
yeah.
humor and like you can't stop watching.
Totally. Oh, it is.
And
It's
that's why
addictive.
they goes viral.
It's addictive, and they're super smart. They also come across as real people,
Yeah,
for anyone who's listening to this podcast who doesn't know the Lipstick Lesbians should check it out. It's I think it's really special. To me, they seem like someone you'd want to, be friends with. Go to
yeah,
Sephora with, right? Go for drinks.
for sure.
Yeah, I love that. All right, so what is the fact that they have taken off? What does that say about the future of beauty? You mentioned earlier when the early days of Kayali, how like the creator economy has changed. Like, what do you see? Where is this going?
Yeah, I think that what I'm observing is that, consumers love creative marketing, but they don't want all the BS and they really want to
Mhm.
have the transparency and understanding of like what goes into products. And I see this like across the board, across categories. See it in like food and beverage and beauty, etc. And I think that creators who can really bring expertise and really demystify a category are going to win. And we've talked internally a lot about like we saw this, just happen at Sephora, right? Like they featured all of the experts, like in makeup
Yeah.
artists, and we talk about how, expertise is continuing to come on the forefront in this expert era. It's not enough to just be like a famous face with a product. If I
Hmm.
think back to like all the celebrity fragrances I did back in the day, like I don't think that's enough anymore because you have to have a real, like, you have to have skin in the game. You have to have a real connection to the product. You have to have a point of view. And it can't just be like, well, my agent thought it was a good idea. I get into the
Hmm.
category and there's a big commercial opportunity. So I think that that's exciting for consumers because hopefully it's going to lead to better quality products, more innovation, and the product should really matter and be differentiated instead of, the other challenge we have right now, which is overconsumption and like everything
Yeah.
kind of looks the same.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that that is a challenge in beauty right now, right? Like not a ton of innovation, a lot of sameness. It's like lip is doing really well. We need more lip.
Totally. I feel like I was looking at with our team, we were looking at all the blushes that launched in Sephora this year. We were like,
Mm,
great, but like, how's a consumer going to know what the difference is between them? Like, there's eight new blushes. And do we need eight new blushes? And
mhm,
like, what makes them differentiated from the blushes that are already out? And so that's where those who can best articulate and tell the story around performance and wear and what's inside and the ingredient heroes and like what really makes it different are going to win and really having like a purpose beyond just
mm.
like here's another lip balm dupe
Yep,
or
yep,
whatever.
totally. And like building a community around it. And I know that word gets thrown around a lot, but it's when it works, it works. It's real.
Yeah. Yes, it is real. And I think that's the thing I talk with founders about a lot is
Mhm,
like there's like this concept of community. They're like, I have a community. And it may be like you have some followers, but maybe you acquired some of them from paid ads. So like they're not really paying
mhm,
attention. But then
mhm,
there's like those diehard grassroots like people that like love and have high affinity for for your brand. And I always will like encourage brands that like you like building community is like being a human and making friends. You just need to like make it scalable because often it's like, okay, I have to do like they're trying to prioritize like how do I get to these people or do this? It's like you got to bring people together, you got to talk to them. They need to see
yeah,
your face and you have to be engaged. And yes, there's of course like many different tactics and levers, but at the end of the day, like you have to do it with like a human touch. Like often I'm seeing brands that like try to magic bullet something. They're like, I need an agency. Or someone asked me yesterday, they're like, what should my UGC strategy be? And I was like, okay, there's so many things to unpack here because it's like,
mhm,
what do you stand for? Who are you trying to connect with? And this person has a really interesting concept. And there's someone from my network. So I was like, let me just like spend
mhm,
some time and we'll talk about it. But the conversation around UGC, I was like, you're going to burn a lot of cash if you just go hire an agency to get UGC. And are those the people you need? Like, is that really going to drive? I was like, I would start right now building people and building a list through, like, there's a very unique value proposition. So I was like, you have a network of people, start with five, have them invite five friends, have them
yeah,
add more, and build it grassroots. Because by the time when you launch next year, you're going to have all these people that understand you, your brand, your mission, and you can activate. And you build an army of people. But like the answer, like sometimes you do need like the agency to amplify or to help be like a lever to
mhm.
like further like boost what your efforts are. But like it's not like you're just gonna like pay a fee and UGC is gonna magically appear. And I think that's like where I see so many brands go wrong. I
Mhm.
remember one of the best things we did at Forever Mood is we would have community events and they're like excellent. Like they win community events and like they're always like going viral, sold out, all the things. We had a personal appearance in Dallas. And so we decided we had a group of people, they were a part of our like we had a club. It's called the Candle Club. And they were people who were in our subscription program. So it was a VIP experience and they would get like a special SKU and they would pay for this membership. And so anyone that was in the area, we got them together. We literally like just popped up in a popsicle. It was like a boozy popsicle store. And everyone got a popsicle and we sat with our founders and we just like talked and took pictures and we shared new things. And it was, like, not expensive, and this is the type of stuff I'm like,
Mhm.
when you're a small brand and you're just starting out, like, it's really just about making connections. I always, like, reference back to Outdoor Voices. Outdoor Voices was, like, getting people
Yeah.
together in the park. This is where it starts. So eventually you need to scale it, and you need to do the fancy pop-ups and all of that, but, like, you can start somewhere, and it doesn't have to be, like, I don't know, 5 figures a month with an
Yeah.
agency and a whatever, whatever.
Right. No, no, it's true. Like really building that like organic base, that love. I think sometimes founders are understandably impatient and you want to get going, make it go faster, right? But there is, I think, brand building, right? It is a journey. It is a marathon.
Yeah. Or even if you're impatient and you wanna scale it, it's like you need to show up is the other
Yeah.
thing. You can't, like, just send a representative sometimes in the
Mhm.
beginning, in the
Mhm.
early days. And then over time, like, your team
Yeah.
is an extension of you, and then you can scale it nationally and then globally, and then that's, your sales force, your education
Yeah.
force. But yeah, I'm like, I have a lot of opinions on that, but I do see that,
Sure.
like, the brands I have worked on that have been the most successful are the ones who have been able to scale community in a meaningful way, and it's been that they've tapped into personal, like, really personal connection.
Definitely. Well, we could talk about this for a long time, but thank you. This has been an amazing conversation. On a final question, which is I'm sure that people ask you for advice on a range of topics all the time. But one question that I imagine you get is people who are working at one of those larger companies like Lauder or Givaudan or something else, and who look at the success that you have had working with indie brands and are thinking, maybe I should do that. What's your advice on that? What do you think?
I mean, it is definitely very different. And so I think you have to do like almost like a full life audit in terms of like
Yeah,
what you want, right? I don't mean to be
that's a
so
great point.
dramatic
It's
about
a
it,
great point. I think you're right.
but you have to think about, okay, what are the things I can be flexible on and where do I want to push? Because there's a lot of upside in working in an entrepreneurial space, but
Mhm.
then how do you mitigate risk? From my perspective, I don't know that the risk today in this environment at a big corporation or a small indie brand, it seems actually quite parallel to me because of like the resizing of
Yeah.
organizations.
Yeah.
So, like for me, I don't think like there's a you're safer at a big corporate company, right?
Mhm.
Situation. So for me, it's like what drives you and what are you passionate about? Are you open to getting your hands dirty? I have found and this became very prevalent when I was a supplier, like executives who would move into, they would start a business, something entrepreneurial, but they came from massive organizations that had infrastructure and then they had no infrastructure. You have to be really comfortable with no infrastructure, how you build it or just how you operate without it. And that you're a self starter and you can get stuff done. And some people can do that seamlessly, and some people it's not for them. And you need to figure out your threshold for that because you're going to wear all the hats. You're going to do some work that is going to be below your pay grade or whatever. You're going to
Mhm.
be, someone said, and she was brilliant. She was like, I'm the CEO and the janitor.
Yeah.
And you are, and you gotta figure it out, especially, like, when I step into roles or I work with, a creator on the business, I make sure that, like I wanna make sure that I'm there for them, like, no matter what. This is just my personal work ethic, like, if you're gonna text me on a Saturday, like, I'm gonna be, like, transparent. I'll be like, "I'm with the kids, but in an hour, I can try to help." Like,
Mhm.
I'm gonna be by your side, and I think you also have to not like, you do need healthy boundaries. I think I've, like, created healthy boundaries, but I also have a comfort level that I'm gonna have flexibility to be present when things are needed. Like, even if I'm at my kid's swim class
Yep.
and I need to send a quick email, it doesn't bother me, and there are some I'd imagine that some people like to have boundaries and like, more rigid boundaries, and then it might not make sense for you to be in an entrepreneurial space because stuff is going to happen every day. Stuff is going to
Yeah.
happen on the holidays. Stuff's going to happen when you're on vacation. For me, like, I think the other thing is you have to think about like, I'm like, this is like, no one talks about it, but like the compensation
Yeah.
structures. And you have to understand like it's going to look different than when you're at a corporation. And what am I like? I might have a big upside because there's like an equity component, but I may not have traditional other types of benefits or
Yeah.
bonus structure or payout, whatever it may be. And whether you're flexible on that. So I really, and then like, how's that going to impact your lifestyle? How is the healthcare part going to impact your
Mhm.
lifestyle and then all the other components? I look holistically, like, and for me, I've found the balance. I'm married and have a partner, so like we have like a good system. And so
Mhm.
like these are all the factors that come into play in terms of like, do you take the leap and do something entrepreneurial? I know so many people too who are like, I took my whole savings and I'm starting my startup and I'm making it happen. And like bless them, because at least they're shooting their shot. And
Yep.
if they're passionate and they want to do it, like I want to help them along the way. But I'm a little methodical, like I talked about, like having boundaries. So I like to structure things. I like to make sure like I mitigate risk while being still like entrepreneurial. So when I make sure like I take a project on, I know that it's going to have potential and that if we have aligned on a timeline, like the timeline is what it is, and I always have other things lined up. Or if the timeline is long term, then I know I have upside, and then we can see where like business takes us in the future. I know it's like abstract, but I think these are all the things I would think about if you're like thinking about making the leap because it's going to feel really different, and you're also going to need to like drive your own agenda and be a self-starter. I mean, my days are packed, and I make sure that like of course I have like the teamwork and the project work, but I need blocks to do the work to feed the meeting. And then I also need to make sure I'm out in the world and keeping, my network warm so that I can activate them with every project I'm working on. I see that like there's someone I need to activate. And so I need to make sure my relationships are really strong so people don't think I'm like out of the blue calling them. And so I'm very methodical on like how I approach my scheduling and my business and my projects. And it's very full and it's fun because
It's
I get to meet the best people and work with these amazing
yes.
people and travel the world and become full.
I love it. I love it, Asha. Well, number one, I think we can really see that ballerina discipline, married with the creative and everything that you do. I love it. And also, I can see why creators love working with you. You have amazing energy and again, such a unique fluency in the language and business of creative. It's really special. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
sharing it with us.
Thank you for having me. This has been a
Yeah.
blast.
Really fun. Thank you. If you liked this episode, find more at cxtinvestments.com and Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And follow me, Tina Bou-Saba, on LinkedIn.